I'm Gao Aiming, Vice President and Editor-in-Chief of China International Publishing Group. I will be moderating this webinar. Now I have the honor to present to you 11 distinguished guests today. They are from 6 countries from 4 continents. Please wave your hand to say hello when you are being presented. They are Mr. Du Zhanyuan, President of China International Publishing Group. Mr. Xu Shunqing, Professor and Vice Dean of the School of Public Health of Wuhan-based Huazhong University of Science and Technology. I assume by this time you must know Wuhan very well.
Yeah.
Mr. Ruel Hui, President of the Bridge Tank of France.
你好吗?
Good. Hello.
Good to see
Mr.
you.
Augusto Soto, Professor of Ecide of Harman-Lülle University of Spain and Director of Dialogue with China project. He is attending the meeting via phone connection. Hello, Mr. Soto.
Hello.
Mr.
Hello.
Wang Wen,
Happy to
Executive.
be here.
Yeah, good. Mr. Wang Wen, Executive Dean of Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies, Renmin University of China.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Mustafa Saeed, Executive Director of the Pakistan-China Institute.
Hello and greetings to all friends.
Thank you. Mr. Li Yong, Deputy Chair of the Expert Committee of China Association of International Trade. Hi. Mr. Zhang Weiwei, Director of China Institute of Fudan University.
Hi.
Mr. Evandro Carvalho, Head of the Center for Brazil-China Studies at FGV of Brazil.
早上好.
Nice to meet you again.
Good morning. Nice to
Mr. Wang Xiaohui, Editor-in-Chief of China Internet Information Center.
Hello, everyone.
And last but not least, Mr. Hussein Ismail, researcher of Egypt State Information Service.
你好.
Thank you all for joining us. The last 3 months have been truly extraordinary in modern history. Yes, we did have seen the largest public health crisis in a century unfold and spread across the world. But we also saw heroic deeds of millions of people, especially medical staff, volunteers, and frontline workers in the face of immense challenges and risks. We also saw joint efforts of individuals, organizations, businesses, and governments in their dogged fight against the pandemic. However, we also have noticed that the collaboration among nations is far from enough to roll back the attack of the deadly virus, which knows no borders. That's why we are here today to discuss how countries can put aside their differences and better coordinate their fight and share their expertise. The webinar will be about 2 hours, including opening remarks, 3 sessions, and a conclusion. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Du Zhanyuan, President of China International Publishing Group, to make the opening remarks. Please, Mr. Du.
Respected experts, dear friends, thank you very much for attending this special forum, the Contemporary China and the World International Think Tank webinar on combating COVID-19, to pool wisdom and share experience. This is the first time for us to organize an international think forum in the form of a video conference. This shows the readiness and the willingness for Chinese and foreign think tank experts to strengthen dialogue and cooperation as the epidemic spreads in the world. On behalf of the sponsor of the event, China International Publishing Group, I would like to express our heartfelt thanks to all of you for your participation. Under the leadership of Communist Party of China and the Chinese government, and through the painstaking efforts of the Chinese people, the anti-epidemic situation in China is moving steadily in a positive direction, and life and work are quickly returning to normal. However, the epidemic is still spreading in the world, seriously affecting people's life and economic growth. The COVID-19 outbreak is still a common challenge for all countries. It has been just 2 to 3 months since the outbreak of COVID-19, but it has already caused enormous losses to the world. In the process of fighting the epidemic, it has been realized more than even that the virus we are battling is our common enemy. Fighting the virus is not only the responsibility of governments, but also requires the support of all sections of the society, especially the proactive participation of ordinary people. It is very important that all people can do their part. Think tanks are a source of thought, and the experts and the scholars are elite people with abundant thought and knowledge. So your response and participation are of vital importance. 4 days ago, the extraordinary virtual G20 Leaders Summit was held, which was a special summit on COVID-19. President Xi Jinping made important remarks at the summit based on China's experience in fighting the COVID-19. President Xi put forward 4 proposals on strengthening international cooperation and stabilizing the world economy. He noted that we should be resolute in fighting an all-out global war against the COVID-19 outbreak, make a collective response for control and the treatment at the international level, support international organizations in playing their active roles, and enhance international macroeconomic policy coordination. His proposals have won extensive support from the international community. The statement of the summit also pointed out that we are determined to spare no effort, both individually and collectively, to protect lives, safeguard people's jobs and incomes, restore confidence, preserve financial stability, minimize disruptions to trade and global supply chains, coordinate on public health and financial measures. This is the right choice of G20 members at the critical moment. As think tanks, we are duty-bound to be part of the anti-epidemic efforts. We need to do more research on the proposals put forward at the summit, actively voice our own opinions, and contribute our wisdom and solutions for the international cooperation in the fighting the outbreak. The virus doesn't have a country name and respects no borders. It is not subject to the will of anyone and will not leave any country alone. The COVID-19 has become the most daunting challenge of the international community. At the critical moment, when we are faced with a common threat, as think tanks, we need to work together to call on all countries to put aside differences, build consensus, strengthen cooperation, and help each other. We need to uphold the vision of building a community with a shared future for mankind, oppose the practices of stigmatizing and politicizing the disease, and refrain from using the disease as a weapon for political maneuvering. At this critical moment, solidarity and cooperation are the most powerful weapon to defeat the virus. We need to take more efficient actions, care for the life of each and every person in the world, and especially help vulnerable countries and groups of the people. In the face of a common challenge, what we need is wisdom, not political calculation. What we need is to help each other, not to take advantage of others' difficulties. And what we need is win-win cooperation, not lose-lose confrontation. The COVID-19 has a profound impact on the world. It has not only brought about an unprecedented public health crisis, but may also trigger an economic crisis or even other crises. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres even said that we are facing a global health crisis unlike any in the 75-year history of the United Nations, and a shock to society as a whole. Think tanks need to study the far-reaching impacts of the pandemic and its uncertainty from a broader global perspective and with deep feelings for humanity. 25 years ago, the Commission on Global Governance formally released a report entitled Our Global Neighborhood. The report put forward the proposals of human security and common security. Regrettably, the proposals did not receive as much attention as they deserve. I think that the future of mankind is becoming more and more closely connected, and it is time for us to take these proposals seriously. The pandemic will eventually end and become a page of our history. And what we need is to draw lessons from history. To this end, I suggest that think tanks of various countries make use of their own strengths, focus on important topics facing mankind, such as building a global prevention and control system to ensure public health security, improving post-pandemic global governance system, the prospect of internet-based work, and climate, environment, and biodiversity protection. Carry out joint research in a relatively systematic manner and address major problems together, and pool global wisdom to seek solutions. In the face of global problems, cooperation is the only choice. Think tanks need to cooperate more than others. As long as think tanks join hands to learn from each other, engage in extensive consultation, and draw on collective wisdom, they will be able to produce high-quality research outcomes in the interest of humanity. Video conference or cloud meeting features high efficiency and low cost. Today's meeting is just a good start. During the epidemic, it is suggested that cloud meetings like this can be held from time to time. After the epidemic, it can also become a regular choice for think tank exchanges. We also call for the establishment of a global platform for think tank exchanges and cooperation, especially to strengthen the building of knowledge sharing platforms. Not long ago, China set up its online COVID-19 Knowledge Center, which is open to all countries and has been warmly welcomed by all parties. China International Publishing Group also published multilingual books like Keywords to Understand China, The Fight Against COVID-19, China's Battle Against the Coronavirus, a diary log, and China, we stand with you to share China's measures, experience, and stories in fighting the epidemic with other countries. We have pledged donation of the international copyright of these books to other countries. Dear friends, as March 29th, there have been more than 600,000 confirmed cases of the COVID-19 around the world, affecting more than 200 countries and regions. In the face of a pandemic, we need global solidarity and cooperation more than ever because no one can be an outsider and no country can stay out of it. History has repeatedly proven that no matter how serious the epidemic is, it will eventually be overcome by mankind. As an ancient Chinese poem goes, bemoan not the spring is departing. Next one must be more enchanting. We look forward to the sunshine of cooperation to dispel the haze of the epidemic as soon as possible, and look forward to getting together with all of you at an early date. I hope you and your families stay safe and healthy, and hope all countries in the world overcome the epidemic as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Du, for your excellent and very thought-provoking remarks. Mr. Du just pointed out that the COVID-19 has brought about an unprecedented public health challenges, triggered an economic crisis, and also created a whole lot of other problems. He called on us to carry out joint research on common threats and challenges facing humanity, pool global wisdom, voice our opinions, join our hands, enhance solidarity, and seek solutions. Thank you again. Now let's move on to our first session of the webinar. The topic of this session is Development Trends of COVID-19 and Joint Global Response. We have 3 speakers for this session, and each of them will have 10 minutes. Let me repeat, each of the speakers will only have 10 minutes. I'll raise this sign when it comes to 9 minutes as a reminder. So the first speaker is Mr. Xu Shunqing, Professor and Vice Dean of the School of Public Health of Huazhong University of Science and Technology. Professor Xu is a very prestigious public health expert. He is based in Wuhan, the epicenter of COVID-19 outbreak in China. He has been fighting on the front line for over 3 months. He joins us from Wuhan now. Professor Xu, you have the floor, please.
Thank you. Good morning, good evening. Hello, everyone. My name is Xu Shunqing from the Wuhan Tongji Medical College, Huazhong University of Science and Technology, Wuhan. As you know, Tongji Medical College has more than 110 years history and with 10 hospitals. More than 10,000 patients suffer from the coronavirus disease were treated in our university hospital. So I'm very honored to have the opportunity to show you Wuhan's experience in combating with the coronavirus disease. With the tremendous joint efforts from the whole world, the epidemic in Wuhan and in China has been controlled. However, the coronavirus has quickly spread to over 200 countries worldwide. Up to now, there are more than 500,000 cases, and there will be more than 1 million cases in this week, I think. In order to slow the rate of new infections and contain the spread, we believe that the foreign experience should be paid more attention to. First, I will tell you, mask is very important. Everyone should wear a mask in public place, such as hospital, supermarket, and so on. There are people, they are mask. I repeat 3 times because of its importance. One of the experience is blocking the concentrated outbreak areas. Also, it is still unknown whether the coronavirus originated. The first outbreak occurred in Wuhan as early as December 31 last year. Wuhan Health Commission officially announced a pneumonia with unknown cause. However, due to the ignorance of new variants, the epidemic prevention and control measures in Wuhan might be a little bit delayed at the beginning. People did not realize the severity of the epidemic until January 20. On January 23, Wuhan was officially locked down, and other cities in Hubei province also banned all vehicular traffic subsequently. Studies have shown that most of the cases in other provinces and cities in China were imported cases in January. And the effective reproductive number, also called R, has dropped to 1 or less after January 23. As a result, the lockdown in Wuhan and the Hubei province has brought time for the epidemic control in other cities of China. Therefore, we believe the timely and effective quarantine is necessary for concentrated outbreak of the epidemic. Secondly, the multi-level targeted approach to epidemic prevention and control should be strictly implemented to avoid exceeding the capacity of the medical resources. Wuhan was shut down on January 23 this year. Subsequently, suspended public transit within the city on January 25. However, there's no multi-level target diagnosis and treatment at the beginning. Due to the severe shortage of medical resources in this period, many confirmed or suspected cases sought medical treatment everywhere, which become a more mobile source of infection. This is very important. Besides, there are many flu patients in the winter and the spring. Because of the panic at the beginning of the epidemic, a large amount of the patients with fever also flooded into fever clinic for medical treatment. We believe this process has caused cruise infection until February 2 this year. With the improvement in medical resources, the government implemented the policy of centralized quarantine and treatment in designated hospital or facility for all confirmed cases, suspected cases, or those who with fever or respiratory symptoms, and the close contacts of the confirmed case. On February 3, the construction of a temporary treatment center we call the Fangchang Hospital was started for treatment of mild patients. The centralized treatment and the isolation of the above 4 types of people were separated, which have effectively prevented cruise infection. By using this epidemiological control method, we can truly control the source of the infection and protect the susceptible population. The number of confirmed cases in Wuhan also began to decline gradually. Therefore, we strongly recommend that multi-level target diagnosis and treatment should be implemented. Different types of the cases like confirmed cases, severe cases, mild cases, susceptible cases, and those close contacts and fever patients who cannot be excluded from the infection must be strictly separated. This way might make it possible to truly cut off the transmission, save medical resources, and improve the treatment rate of the severe cases. Thirdly, we should pay attention to asymptomatic and incubation period infections. Isolated individuals in contact with the COVID COVID-19 cases before the symptom onset. The expanded the capacity of testing include the nucleic acid testing or antibody testing. At present, we have been many reports of the symptomatic and incubation period infections. Our research team has also found that the cases in incubation period were infectious, and this case might have been infectious at 4 days prior to symptom onset. Therefore, epidemiological investigation and isolation should start at least 4 days before symptom onset of the cases. In addition, the capacity of testing should be expanded as much as possible. Only in this way, all potential spreads of the coronavirus could be identified and isolated. Another suggestion is detailed and practical home isolation guidelines for residents is important. At the very beginning, all the close contacts and suspects were asked to quarantine at home. However, many family cluster cases have occurred due to the lack of the professional knowledge on medical and health care. So the result of the home isolation were unsatisfactory. We believe that it is necessary to provide the residents with a detailed and practical home isolation guidelines and a sanitary disinfection supply if all close contacts and the susceptible cannot be centralized and isolated. Since the per capita living area of the French and other European countries is larger than that of China, home isolation might be an effective method if there is a practical home isolation guidelines. So, China has received a lot of support and encouragement from all over the world in the fighting against the coronavirus. With a tremendous joint effect from the world, the epidemic in China has been basically under control. It's a time for countries to work together and cooperate. We hope that our experience during this period could provide some effective suggestions for you. We also actively cooperate with the international community to fight and win the battle against the virus. That's all for my suggestion. Hope all the health and thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Xu. You are excellent in controlling your time. And thank you for sharing with us some of the very useful experiences from Wuhan in fighting COVID-19, such as like wearing masks, quarantine practices, the building of medical capacities, and the treatment of patients, etc. I hope that it will be helpful for other countries in fighting this disease. Please take care, Professor Xu.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Mr. Ruel Hui, President of the Bridge Tank. Mr. Hui is a well-known French scholar and researcher. He has a very good Chinese name, that is Zhou Rui. He joins us from Paris today. Mr. Zhou, please go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, it's an honor to be here, and it's a joy to meet old friends, Du Jianyuan, you, Gao Wanming as well. And it's a deep honor to speak just after Professor Xu, who's been doing so much in Wuhan. So let me at the onset say that right from the beginning in France, in Europe, we've been very empathetic to the situation in Wuhan. In China, some of us knew right from the beginning what an epidemic is, how an epidemic can turn a pandemic, and we right from the beginning knew that we had to observe and learn from China, and that we had to be not just sympathetic, but also empathetic, and to be together in what could have been what already from the beginning threatened to become a pandemic. We were some people in France and Europe saying that and praising the courage of Chinese people in their daily lives, which went into lockdown to kind of build a wall, to build a dam against the epidemic. And this, I must say, gave us some time to prepare a little bit. That's one. The second people I want to praise is all the medicals in the world, all the researchers in the world. We all learn by doing in this epidemic. This is a new epidemic, but they learn by being on the front line. They learn at the peril of their life every day and commitment. And we all know in our families, extended families and friends, people who are in the medical, nurses, and they are really the people who are saving our lives while our policymakers ponder and try and decide and learn from the virus. They are like us, but more than us. They have no time to learn. They have to act immediately. I wanted to praise them before starting, bringing 3 points basically in the 10 minutes. The first point is, as I touched upon it already, that it's an ongoing learning. It is a new virus. When it hit China first, it was a virus we knew nothing about, and this is still largely a virus we don't know much about collectively in the world, and we still have to learn together in a shared manner. So on this respect, I think it's important to praise that this workshop today has a lot of sharing, and what Professor Xu said is still important for us in Europe and for other parts in the world where the epidemic is coming, where we still have to learn a lot about self-confinement, about lockdown, about family treatment, about the for instance, the tests and etc. So it's still timely to share this experience, and I thank the organizers for that, and I thank the other contributors for that. It is a global, ongoing learning as we see just now new questions coming, how we will unlock ourselves in the future, whether there could be waves, how we have to reconstruct the economy, how the pandemics must be tamed, how the pandemic, the sanitary dimension may be linked with the economic aspects, may be linked with the social and human aspects. So I think on all that, China had an advance because unfortunately China got hit first by the virus, and it's great China is sharing that. But I think I would praise for what Minister Du Jianyuan said, that we have to routinely have this exercise because we have a lot to learn more. And some of the measures, some of the treatment that China could do courageously as an organized country, some of the measures that we're doing in Europe as an organized continent and as a continent having the means and the economic means, some of these measures might not be accessible to countries in the global south, to Africa namely, and we have to work together. So my first message is this process is a learning process, an ongoing process, and I would conclude on this first message quoting our French Prime Minister, who yesterday said, and he quoted China, he said China had to grasp with a new virus and discover. In many respects, we in Europe are still grasping with many aspects of the virus. So it's a learning process. My second point is on solidarities. Solidarities have expressed within societies, across societies. A crisis is a time of enduring, is also a time of opportunity. The Chinese philosophy knows that, has known that for the last thousands of years. A crisis is also a time where one can see the worst, but also the best of a society. And I would want to insist on the solidarities. There are international solidarities. Early on, some European countries have been sending masks to China. Now China is sending masks to other European countries. In France, and sorry, I'm talking more about Europe, not as a Eurocentrism, but I have distinguished colleagues from other parts of the world, and they will know better about other parts of the world. Now in Europe, we need those masks. China is sending them. But what I want to say is that even within Europe, the amount of scarcity is relative. We lack masks in France, but still France is sending masks to Italy. We lack masks in Germany, but Germany is sending masks to France. For all sorts of reasons, maybe because we have different waves, because the structures are different. So far, Germany is less hit than France, but Germany is already welcoming French patients are getting transferred to Germany and cured in Germany. So I would want to insist on these solidarities. Solidarities are also within the society. We have a liberal way of organizing the society in Europe. Well, I must say it's soothing to see that industrialists, associations, which had stopped some of their usual production process to transform their organizational structure, to transform their production units from sometimes textile or something else into mass production. We see industrialists which have unused capacity and they're going towards helping the companies that produce those ventilators, those respirators, which are so important for the critical patients. So we see a whole industry virtually shifting overnight. And some years ago in Davos, we spoke about Industry 4.0. Now we are in practice at Industry 4.0, and we have this solidarity with Africa. We're transferring the ideas from Europe to Africa on how to transform the industrial systems as well. So the solidarity is financial. The G20 has mentioned some aids and some packages, but the solidarity is also organizational, industrial. And this was my second point. The third point I would want to mention is that as think tanks, and I subscribe to what was said also by Du Jianyuan and Yu Gaoanming, we have to think about the system ahead. The system ahead has to be rethought in terms of medical and research preparedness, for sure. We see very clearly that we'll have waves of confinement, deconfinements, lockdown, lockout, lockdown, lockout. At least this is a threat. And at least there is a risk that the epidemics bounce back from the global south. So research has to be accelerated, and there's only one way to accelerate the research for vaccination and for tests. It is through complete mutualization. At least on this research cannot be private goods appropriated by companies or by countries. It has to be a global public good. Another global public good is the global preparedness in terms of the WHO, in terms of planning global stocks of vaccines, global stock of medications and of apparatuses to solve the epidemic. Another issue on the global system, and I shall stop with that, is the economic and political system. We've seen that packages have been announced. This crisis is very different, and here is the economist that is speaking. This crisis is very different from the 2008 economic crisis, where the packages could go only to finance. This time the packages have to go to the direct people, to the companies. And we have a common challenge because we have a shared humanity. We have a common challenge on helping the poorest countries with the most informal sectors have this money really access the people. And I'll stop with the political system saying that it's rejoicing to see that some global organizations, which sometimes are not aligned with China, sometimes are, namely the Socialist International, the Liberal International, right from the beginning, and we know that because at the Bridge Tank, our think tank, we've been working with them, have first of all expressed support to China, have expressed support through letters we framed with them to the WHO Director General, when he was the only one saying that we need to learn to China. Now, those global organizations have shown their solidarity beyond politics, beyond ideologies. And today, and we have to prepare the next UN General Assembly, which will happen in September, we have to collectively, the large powers of the world, the emerging countries, not to forget the group of 77, we have to propose measures towards a global governance of health security. And I think that this think tank or this platform of think tanks that you have launched may be an instrument very useful to contribute towards that. And I thank you for these opportunities to share those ideas.
Thank you, Mr. Hui, for giving us the three key messages: the ongoing learning, the solidarity, and also looking ahead to devise some more effective systems. Thank you again. Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Augusto Soto, Professor of ISADI of Ramon Llull University of Spain and Director of Dialogue with China project. Mr. Soto is a China expert. He also has a very nice Chinese name, Su Aogu. Now he joins us from Barcelona. Mr. Soto, you have the floor, please.
Thank you. It is a pleasure of a high honor to be here today with you today. Thank you again for inviting me. Figures for the last 3 weeks of March in China clearly show that the peak of COVID-19 transmissions is largely over, with new cases almost equal to zero. China is telling the world with concrete figures at hand that the disease is controllable. This is very important. The disease is controllable. That sign is important. The visit of President Xi Jinping to Wuhan 20 days ago reflected the dramatic change of the deadly trend this month. Epidemiologists and leaders in Spain and in the rest of Europe and around the world have seen with admiration this extremely positive tendency. The results in China contrast sharply with what is happening right now in Europe and in the rest of the planet, where the infection is increasing dramatically, as we know. Spain and the rest of Europe are studying models to emulate. For example, the Chinese model, the South Korean model, the Singaporean model, or in Europe, the Swedish model, which is in progress. It is clear that for us in Europe, we could try emulating parts of the four. Nevertheless, as a whole, the Chinese model seems to be the most comprehensive and suitable example for our continent to emulate according to our traditions, of course. Unity. More than once, different Western sinologists and Asian historians have reflected on the unity of China achieved more than 2 millennia ago, comparing it with its civilization equivalent in the West, namely Europe. The European Union is a visionary project in which each of its 27 members has dimensions comparable to some Chinese provinces. For example, Hubei province has almost the same population of France. Now, if we look at our latest crisis, namely the economic crisis that started in 2008, the refugee crisis in 2015, and the one we're in now, namely the COVID-19 crisis, so far indicate that unity in action has not yet been reached. The same aid from China to Italy and Spain and other EU countries, which in addition to advice is providing valuable medical material, has contrasted for long days with the refusal of some European countries to provide their partners within the EU with medical supplies in this emergency. It must be said that in the last 5 days, though, we have seen some positive signs in this field, but it's still not enough. The future beyond this crisis. Any biologist or health planner will tell us this crisis should also serve as a warning to us so that we are better prepared for a future pandemic originating in any continent. This goes beyond quickly identifying the problem and sharing it with the international community as soon as possible, and that the main countries producing medicines coordinate better. It is also about collaborating in more fields and understanding that due to the continuous growth of the world population in the context of industrial civilization, which reduces the ozone layer, added to the expansive urbanization process that implies a decrease of nature, causing closer vicinity to the animal world, increases the possibilities of new global pandemics. In the case of the US, of the Trump administration, its reaction today has disappointed again. It is a reaction pervaded by isolationism and short-term behavior, contrasting with the highest level American scientific community, which has contacted the Chinese scientific community precisely because it understands that this crisis concerns us all. This crisis is the best example that we share common challenges and a common destiny, and that we will most likely have to face many more challenges following the multilateral spirit inspiring both the United Nations and the World Health Organization, as well as the World Trade Organization. Dramatic warming indicators in the Antarctica, for example, recorded earlier this year, show that our planet has fever. If we do not act together soon, it will require intensive care. Final reflections. While it is true that the COVID-19 is a global health crisis, it is not less true that it has emerged in the context of other communicable diseases that annually kill millions of people, causing concern, but not catastrophic fear. COVID-19 should serve to remind us that there are other infectious diseases that cause epidemics, such as tuberculosis, with 1.5 million deaths a year worldwide, or measles, which caused more than 150,000 deaths in 2018, and having catastrophic effects now in countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, with 334,000 cases and 6,326 deaths between 2019 and February this year. Thus, a great challenge for the future will be managing uncertainty to lessen the effects of panic among the main economic agents, dragging stock markets to the waterfall, causing a mess in the material world in each country, and that does not correspond to mathematical rationality or what it tells us science. Both great advisors to face a pandemic like this one, from which China is emerging victorious. Also, it is key for the EU to find a powerful country, a group of countries outside the EU, with which to cooperate in a strongly enhanced bilateral way. Traditionally, during the post-World War II period, that country was the US. Over the last years, things have changed dramatically, though. It is clear that it is not an option anymore to rely to a very high degree on a unilateral against the world and unable to cooperate power. Actually, when thinking of global emergencies, we need to consider an effective and fast reacting country, possibly a country that, due to its size, historic experience, and modernity, could come up to the fore to the community of nations, bringing in innovation, ideas, and ideas translated into practice that could help solve global issues. That country is clearly China. The current global health crisis shows that. Also shows that together with China, a united Europe, soon after the peak of the epidemic is well behind, hopefully after the second half of April, should lead to more global action, and together with any major power willing to join. Certainly, these countries on this should work together with the main global institutions, including the United Nations, the World Health Organization, and the International Monetary Fund, with the G7 and the G20, and pooling resources to work on treatments and a vaccine. Also, it's necessary with global action to limit the economic damage by coordinating fiscal and monetary stimulus measures and keeping trading goods open. And last but not least, collaborating on reopening borders when scientists scientists tell us that we can. After this crisis, we can end up in a frightful economic social crisis or in a relatively milder economic shock, leading in any case towards a new culture of global collaboration. If we do not end up understanding that we share a future which is common, mankind will not survive long on this planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Soto, for your excellent speech. Mr. Soto compared the different anti-epidemic models adopted by different countries in the world and highlighted the importance of unity, solidarity, extraordinary methodology, and experience sharing among countries. And what I was impressed was that Mr. Soto said that the world is having a fever even before we have been stricken by this COVID-19. So he called on nations to foster a new mechanism of global collaboration and coordination and understand that we have a shared future. Thank you again. Now, let's move on to the second session. The topic is impact of COVID-19 on economy, society, and national governance. We also have 3 speakers in this session. Each of them has 10 minutes. The first speaker is Mr. Wang Wen, Executive Dean of Chongyang Institute. Professor Wang has long been involved in the studies of global governance, macroeconomy, and others. He joins us from Beijing. Professor Wang, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the invitation to let me share my views on COVID-19 and as well as the world situation. So as some of my friends knew, in the past couple of weeks, my colleagues and me published a lot of articles at the end of the February and the early of the March to accurately predict that the global spread of COVID-19 will lead to the Great Depression and a large-scale outbreak of the COVID-19 in the US, as well as a negative interest rate in the US. So for the future, in short term, my view is a little bit pessimistic. I think that things will get worse. Why? So I want to share 3 views with my friends globally. First thing is that globalization is in shock. The world will fall into the Great Depression like 1930s. So nowadays around 50 countries have declared national emergency. So in first quarter of the 2020, the global cross-border flow of people, materials, and capitals has been reduced by about 50%, far more than any anti-globalization force in history. So since middle of February, the US stock market has plummeted, ending 11 years bull market and evaporating more than around 15 trillion US dollars. So reflecting the unprecedented panic in capital markets. So I think that the current globalization shock is likely to lead to the worst global economic growth like the 1930s, worse than in 2009. So at present, I read a latest estimate from international think tank. The think tank estimate that the global economic growth will be minus 2.2% this year, and including minus 2.8% in the US, minus 5% in the UK, minus 1.5% in Japan, and minus 5% in France, and 1% in China. So, however, I think as an economic study scholar, I think if the pandemic continue to spread and there's no useful, available vaccine or medicine in short term, the world economy may be even worse. So globalization is in shock. No one can real benefit. So I think that nowadays the world economy likely fall into a very huge depression. So I think the world should unite not only to prevent the pandemic, but also to prevent the depression. This is very, very important. The first point I want to share. The second point I want to share is that everyone must pay great attention to this pandemic. And life is more important than freedom. This is a little bit different value between China and some countries from West. So nowadays, as my colleague right now said, the pandemic is likely to spread for a long time. So to overcome it, we need the best quality of human beings, such as unity, patience, cooperation, mutual assistance, etc. So nowadays, I think China, as we all know that in the past 2 months, more than 1 billion Chinese people have canceled family gathering, as well as all social events, large and small. And Chinese people have united as one and are approaching a final victory in fight against the COVID-19 outbreak. I think at the first period of the China war against the COVID-19, some of the United States media or some of the media from Europe, they laughed China's against the COVID-19, and also for US, they waste more than 1 month for warning. But fortunately, 2 weeks ago, US President Donald Trump has finally woke up to the reality and declared a national emergency. And the US is, I think, the US is a superpower with a rich crisis management experience. US has sufficient medical resources. So as long as they are fully mobilized, I believe that the US will defeat the virus as China has done. But what I worry about is civil society, because in a lot of people of the US, they think the freedom is the most important things, more than life, more than isolated lifestyle. So I have a suggestion to my American friends: don't assume living things to change attitude. Don't assume that mortality rate will be low. Don't accept that only the elderly will fall ill. Anyone can be a victim or a source of the infection. So because no one is immune. So I think that in this here, I have to say I admire Wuhan citizens, because as we all know, Wuhan citizens, they in the past 2 months they stay in the home. This is a tremendously mature attitude. That's the second point I want to share. Third and last point I want to share is that nowadays, as we all know, that nowadays we should strengthen the mutual coordination and work together to fight against the new colonized bias. So, but nowadays the problem is that the media, some Western media, they often criticize China. I think this is totally unfair, and also some of them identify China as such as a real sick man, or talking about the China virus, Wuhan virus. Still, till now, this is offend Chinese people. I dissatisfied about it. So I think this is totally wrong. For United States, I suggest that the U.S. should act like a wartime leader, just like they did in the World War II. They should unite the world. And if they don't, so all countries should strengthen the coordination with the WHO, comprehensive promote international cooperation, and established the new global governance rules. So I think as a Chinese, I'm very grateful to all countries, regions, and enterprises that have helped China over the past 2 months. So now that the situation in China has improved, China is offering donations to over maybe 60 countries and regions. So China is sending the medical material assistance and medical experts to help countries such as Iran, Italy, Spain, France. So I think that this is very good. So I think maybe in short term, I'm very, but in long term, I'm very optimistic. So we are sure to win the third world war against the COVID-19. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wang, for your 3 points. Since Mr. Wang has actually not raised a very upbeat picture of this world, it's more important for the nations, for the governments to unite as one to meet this common challenge. Okay, let's come to our next speaker. Our next speaker will be Mustafa Saeed, Executive Director of the Pakistan-China Institute. Mr. Saeed is a noted scholar. He joins us now from Islamabad. Mr. Saeed, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Mr. Gao Anming, and other friends, Mr. Wang Wen, and other friends from different parts of the world. It's a pleasure to be here. Pakistan is surging in the COVID-19 cases, leading in South Asia as of now, and we have approximately 2,000 cases now. So we are at the forefront on the war against this coronavirus in our part of the world. And I think when we talk about national governance and when we talk about society and economy, I think we have to start on the outset from the leadership that the CPC has showed in this time of crisis in China. I think it's the biggest political party in the world, boasting about 90 million members. And the fact that the Chinese people, the state, and also the large enterprises like Alibaba became united to confront this crisis is something that we all need to learn from. And that 1.5 billion people was the highest risk, I think, globally. And the disease could have had the worst effect, the most adverse effect on China. So flying in 20,000 medical professionals in Wuhan and containing it and then ultimately eliminating it is, I think, a case study which think tanks can actually undertake and learn from, and also replicate that in our countries, which are still struggling to contain this virus, and also a lot of the times groping in the dark. Countries like my country, Pakistan, where we have 200 million people, we still are unaware of the risks that it poses in the rural areas, the common people. They are still not very familiar with the gravity of the situation. So I think there's a lot to learn from China. number one. Secondly, we have to look at it from a perspective of globalization. We are very, very interconnected, and till this coronavirus happened, we were all reaping dividends and benefits of globalization. There was commerce, e-commerce, tourism, travel, and economies were making a lot of money, interdependent, interconnected with each other. People and civil society were interconnected with each other. But what we did not factor in was the great responsibility that comes with globalization. And that is a very important missing link, which is now evident to us today, that while there are benefits of globalization, it also means that we have to exercise greater responsibility. Not only the states and the governments, but also the people, the civil society, think tanks together. And because we are interconnected, things like coronavirus can have a multiplier effect, a stronger effect, and an impact which they probably wouldn't if we were not a globalized world. And when we talk about responsibility, we also have to talk about restraint. And as my friend Mr. Wang Wen said, this is a time where we have to look at the problem from a humanitarian angle. The single most important thing that unites us is humanity and empathy, that we are all humans and that there is no winner in this situation. If Pakistan is suffering, our neighboring countries will suffer. If Pakistan is winning, our neighboring countries will win, and vice versa. So when we talk about the coronavirus, we have to talk about it as one human race. We cannot, at this time, do politics. And we cannot cast aspersions or racist slurs. This virus knows no religion. It knows no country. It knows no borders. And as Bill Gates said, everyone is equal for this virus, no matter what position you are in or what your status in society is. So this is a time to put politics and political interests aside and come together. And only if we come together will we be able to win this war against the coronavirus. And I think that this compassion, without looking at the countries that we are seeing from China, as some of the earlier speakers said, 2 months ago, the situation was different. I have a lot of Chinese friends in Beijing and China. They were all asking for masks, for assistance. And now everyone is looking towards China for assistance, which China is giving to all countries, whether it's Africa, whether it's Asia, whether it's the Middle East. The manufacturing is taking place in China, and also the donation is taking place in China. The third issue in grappling with this crisis is that of civil society and think tanks. As the president of the CIPG earlier said, Mr. Du Zhonyuan, that think tanks have a very crucial role because think tanks can mobilize civil society. And we saw that in China, as President Xi rightly said, it's a people's war. It's a war which has to be won not only by the state, but by the people. So mobilizing people and resources of individuals, of private sector is very important. And I think that the suggestion that was given on the outset by Mr. Du Zhonyuan of global network of think tanks to cooperate on such issues like coronavirus, I think is the need of the hour. And I think that a task force should be set up of think tanks from different countries to immediately start working on coordination, on coordinated research, and on coordinated video webinars like we are having right now. Because we have to take a proactive step forward to coordinate and cooperate with each other. This is not a choice. This is not a choice for us now in this situation. This is a necessity. Furthermore, I'd like to also touch upon the crisis management techniques, the specific crisis management techniques that are needed in some of the countries. This is a time when the governance structure, the regular status quo of governance has to be rebooted, and we have to be in crisis mode. And decisions which are usually taken through different channels of bureaucracy, through different procedures, need to be circumvented. And I think that was done in China. For example, one problem in Pakistan we are facing is that for our government to procure different equipment, medical equipment, we have a process of procurement. We have to advertise, then the advertisement has to go internationally, and well noted, Mr. Gawanbi. Just 1.5 minutes. So that procurement delay and other issues which we usually undertake in normal scenarios are really delaying the crisis management that is needed on the ground. And people are suffering. So I think it would be great that if think tank cooperation can lead to people coming from China to our countries, or maybe having video meetings with our health medical professionals to show us and tell us what we need to be doing and what worked and what did not work. Since you have successfully gone through the coronavirus and you have come out successful and strong, what worked in your country and what didn't work, I think that will be of immense help to the rest of the world, including Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saeed. I very much agree with you, because you emphasized the great responsibility that should come together with globalization. And you mentioned that we are talking about some very deadly virus. We are not talking about some beer. So we should put aside the political divide, political differences, and unite to seek some common response. And because we have no choice, it's a necessity. Thank you. The last speaker of this session is Mr. Li Yong, Deputy Chair of the Expert Committee of China Association of International Trade. Mr. Li has long been involved in research on global trade and international economic relations. He joined us from Beijing today. Mr. Li Yong, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for bringing such a nice cohort of distinguished thinkers, pundits, scholars to discuss the situation that we face today. And I have to say, we are facing a situation that we have never experienced in the century. And I would like to share with you some of my observations and thoughts. First, we have to realize the situation is getting worse. Let me give you an update. There are 202 countries and the regions having cases of COVID-19. The total number of infected cases or confirmed cases is over 50,000. That is a huge number. And in the US, we are seeing an increasing number of patients And today, there are a total of 143,000. So it is not an exaggeration. It has become a pandemic. And it is not a kind of a disease that anybody can really stand clear of. So this is really a situation that everybody is facing, and we have to be aware that the number keeps ballooning. The second point I want to make is countries have finally come to each other's rescue, which means countries have started to work together. But first and foremost, we got to make it clear that no one has any reasons, political, social, economic, whatever, to sensationalize what is happening. And no one should tolerate Schadenfreude, meaning no one should entertain on the sufferings of the people. China plays an important role in terms of establishing the experiences of dealing with the spread, sharing it with the world. And to give you an idea of China's role, China has offered help to nearly 90 countries. Just about a week ago, I think that the number was 86. And a lot of people are speculating what is happening between China and the US, the biggest economic powers in the world. And a lot of people are speculating that the two powers are at odds. But I would like to give you an update. Yesterday, the first aircraft carrying the needed materials, equipments, medical supplies in general, arrived in New York from Shanghai, bringing 12 million gloves, 130,000 N95 masks, 17.6 million surgical masks, 50,000 gowns, 130,000 hand sanitizers, etc. And those will be distributed in the disease-stricken tri-state areas around New York State. So going forward, I think there will be 20 similar flights in a series, that will be scheduled to arrive over the next 30-day period. So the topic we are talking in the second part of the discussion is about what is going to what is the impact, for example, on the global governance and the economic and social impact. I think the pandemic is going to bring us far more reaching consequences. There will be a lot of changes. For example, people's behavior, lifestyle may change, business environment may change, the supply chain relationship may change, regulatory environment may change. And I think the global governance probably is going to look at or need to shift from managing the new normal to managing new abnormal, from economic governance to comprehensive governance, from algebraic management to exponential management, which means that we are facing a highly dynamic and fast-changing situations which will require higher response and more sophisticated approaches. So China's response is this. we, as part of the G20, China is going to coordinate with the rest of the members. What China has done so far in terms of the stimulus plans, a total of just around, let me check the number, okay? 344 billion US dollars have been injected into the economy in different forms. For example, about 17 billion it has been used in the disease management and control. About 142 billion US dollars has been used for tax and fee reduction, and about 184 billion US dollars is going to be injected into the economy to increase liquidity. So, what we looking forward, we are facing a lot of challenges, to be honest with you. So there's no reason to be pessimistic, but we still really have something to worry about. Here, I would like to bring your attention to the 5 P's that we need to be aware of and to avoid. The first P is panic. Panic is spread not just among people in countries that have been affected by the virus. It is also spread into the decision making and even the think tanks. The second P is phobia, which has resulted in blame games, discrimination, stigmatizing, and even racism. The third P is paranoia. And there's been persistent, stubborn suspicion, refuse to accept anything as a fact, and demonizing a country for its effort. The fourth P is politicization, which is, I think, it undermines the basis of trust across the world, increases strategic suspicion, undermines human effort to achieve the common goal and beat the virus. And the fourth P is protectionism. I think I'm going to come to this point later on. So we need to have a cure. So let me break down the word cure into 4-letter acronym. C is going to be the consensus that the world needs to build. For example, on coordination, on cooperation, and those are much needed in the joint effort, in the concerted action to deal with the future challenges. The letter U represents, of course, unity. Everybody is talking, I think today is talking about unity, solidarity. I think, unity or solidarity is the basis of everything and should be achieved under the global multilateral governance. R is representing restoration of economic relevance. It is going to be the restoration of the resilience in the global economy and the restoration of the realignment of the best practices that will help us to build the economy on a more robust basis. And the last word I would like to E. I think it is the economy that is the basis of everything. Okay, without which the world cannot really survive. So let me conclude with 10 takeaways that I arguably call it 10 golden rules. Okay, rule number 1. Everything is possible because the world has come together to fight against the outbreak of COVID-19. Rule number 2, nothing is easy because the situation is complex and always require additional effort. Rule number 3, we can erase the virus to zero through global health cooperation, but our economies can't. And we need coordination in physical policies, monetary policies to make sure that the financial system is stable and healthy. Rule number 4, we should protect lives and safeguard income and jobs, but we should never protect trade. Rule number 5, confidence can only be regained with financial stability and robust growth of our economies. And rule number 6, we need to be serious with social distancing while avoiding economic distancing. Economic distancing is dangerous. Rule number 7, minimize disruptions to trade and global supply chain by creating opportunities. And rule number 8, the world should cooperate in terms of healthcare, to produce the cure for the virus. And rule number 1, if you are discouraged by the difficulties lying ahead, revisit rule number 1. Everything is possible. If you are overly optimistic about the situation today and in the future, review rule number 2. Nothing is going to be easy. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lee, for sharing with us your analysis of the situation in the world and your call for the governments to reinforce their efforts to address the abnormal instead of only the normal. And also your 5 Ps, your cure, and also your rules. That's very thought-provoking. Thank you again. Now let's move on to our last session. The topic is crisis management of public health emergencies and reform of global governance system. This time we have 4 speakers. Each of them has 10 minutes. Our first speaker is Mr. Zhang Weiwei, Director of China Institute of Fudan University. Professor Zhang specializes in China's development model and comparative studies of political and foreign policies. He joins us from Shanghai. Professor Zhang, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a great pleasure to join this video conference. And actually, I happen to find Professor Soto. His image is not there. He was my friend long time ago, back 20 years. We met each other many times. And well, for this COVID-19 pandemic, indeed, it's a threat to all human beings, to humanity. And we must unite and fight back this pandemic together. And we all know that WHO sent a team of experts to China, and they found that the Chinese approach so far is they consider this as the only tested, credible approach so far. So WHO strongly recommend other countries to learn something from the Chinese model while adapting to its own national conditions. Yet for one reason or another, for at least 1 month and even up to now, the Chinese approach is somehow, mocked, ridiculed, especially in the mainstream media in the West. I really think the Western media has played a disservice to the international community, to the Western societies. It's a common enemy for all humanity, and the Chinese experience is the common assets, treasures for mankind. And I think the Western media has made 3 huge mistakes, which really have produced tremendous costs for Western societies now. I hope they can address this kind of mistakes in the coming months. One is a strong ideological bias, which is so stupid, I don't know how to describe it, I read this article in The Economist on 18th February. It's called the One Bug, Two Systems, which claims, democracy can cope with this disease much, much better than so-called authoritarian regimes in China. Still politicize everything through the angle of democracy versus autocracy. I think this is one of the most stupidity of the stupidity. I said, to my friends economists, I said we can almost read your articles on China, especially on political matters, in the reverse way. If you say it's not good, actually it's very good. We did some study on that, and this article is obvious. It's laughable. And also read La Figaro in early March. You have an article by Madame Isabelle Lasserre, also claiming, the Western model democracy can cope with this issue much, much better than the Chinese model. I think this ideological part of the game should really go away. We should focus, as I said, good governance versus bad governance, which is far more important than democracy versus autocracy. Yeah. So this is my first point. The second point is this cultural bias. For so many days in the Western media, you can feel a kind of, it's not our part of the problem, it's Asia's problem, and they are less hygienic, and we love freedom, our way of life is better than their collective life. From Chinese point of view, it's freedom, liberty must be together with responsibility. That's how a normal society should function. Otherwise, extreme liberty, whatever, it will lead to crisis. And this is the case now, what we have seen in over the past 2 months. And then there are also another bias. How should I put it? I call this professional or bias. Whether you agree or not, because I look at this latest index. It's called the Global Health Safety Index, published by Johns Hopkins University. If you look at the top 5, it's United States, number 1, and UK, number 2, Netherlands, number 3, and the list goes on. China is at the number 51, behind Mongolia, behind Vietnam, behind Serbia and other countries. Of course, I do not say the Chinese medical system or approach is always better. No, it's let's be fair. This kind of index really pictures how a country like the United States, which really handled this H1N1 crisis in such a massive way and caused so many deaths and contamination, and can still be number 1. So I think this kind of bias, if you look at the Western media in February, March, even today, there was some kind of take everything light. If China could handle this and maintain the death rate and mortality rate at 1%, our first-class medical system, we can of course do much better than China. As a result, I even saw this WHO expert. He said, don't be misled by this false impression, because China has done so well with tremendous sacrifice and efforts, and with a very good medical system. It has done that, but most other countries cannot do that. And we can see this now increasingly true. So I think people should learn really objectively. This kind of bias has prevented the Western media from looking at China, Chinese model, Chinese experience accurately, objectively, and then as a result, the West, indeed, at least some countries in the West, to be honest, squandered this 1 or 2 months that Chinese have made tremendous sacrifice, this kind of window opportunity, as described by the WHO. Now, if you look at the Chinese approach this time, the famous slogan, what we call the Dao, that's very important. People's life is above everything. 人的生命是最重要的 People's life. It's not the American model. Business interests, economic interests are above everything else. They look at the famous 16 words, 16 characters, 16个字啊，坚定信心 confidence to win. If you look at the Western approach, so many countries have no confidence whatsoever. Yeah, defeatism. Even we have this UK approach, what's called the herd immunity, and which is a kind of defeatism. And then the second is unite as one, 同舟共济, yeah, all on the same boat. People, whether the government and people, all walks of life work together. And this is very important. Here I mention this again. Perhaps it's time for the West to reflect its way of life. The individual rights goes to the extreme, you know. So people, if you wear masks, we have the freedom. You know, you have say in Germany, you have a rule not to have a gathering of 1,000 people. Then people hold a gathering of 999 people. No, you have the responsibility for other people, for your elderly, for other members of society. So I think I'm glad that we Chinese society have maintained this old traditional value, harmony, and sense of responsibility for others. Then 科学治理 scientific way. We have to do it in a scientific way, you know. But if you look at Donald Trump, it's just like a flu. It will go away in summer, and masks are useless. You know, mortality rate is low. I think this is not scientific. Yeah, it's laughable, you know, today. So I think this kind of non-scientific approach brings about bad results and cost. And the Chinese prefer is it's early test, early quarantine, early treatment, early cure. So this is the way. And lastly, what we call the 精准施策, very methodical approach. Yeah, if you look at the Chinese approach, it's very methodical. And we have a high risk area, middle risk area, low risk area, and we have policies, measures adapted to each of these categories. And then if you look at the figures published every day, at least 4 categories: suspected cases, confirmed cases, mild cases, serious cases. So that's the way how we do it. I think with this kind of ideological approach, all this are messed and provides disservice to many countries, including the Western countries. Finally, you know, I always said that the most important 2 messages from China's rise or from the Chinese dramatic transformation over the past 4 decades are 2 slogans from Chairman Deng Xiaoping. One is seeking truth from facts, not from dogmas. It's crucial, yeah. We are not bound by dogmas whatsoever, east or west. Seeking truth from facts. Try to be objective as possible. And number 2, emancipation of the mind. 解放思想, yeah. 实事求是, 解放思想. In other words, there's so many great ideas. China learned so much from the West. We are still learning. We'll continue to learn. But the West, at least many parts of the West, said, we do need to learn from China. I think this is proved to be totally wrong. So in order to build a global health community to fight this pandemic, we need these 2 ideas: emancipation of the mind and seeking truth from facts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zhang, for your excellent speech. And thank you for sharing your analysis of some Western reporting, which is well biased, very stubborn, or to the best, is actually not very balanced. It's not helpful for the public to understand what China has done. Next, let's welcome Mr. Evandro Carvalho, head of the Center for Brazil-China Studies at FGV of Brazil. Mr. Carvalho is a well-known scholar. Mr. Carvalho, please.
First of all, oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Sure. Good.
Okay. So nice. Yeah. So first of all, I'd like to thank the dear CIPG President and Vice President, Mr. Du Zhangyuan, and also Mr. Gao. Thank you very much. And dear participants of this seminar, it's a great honor to participate in this webinar from Brazil. Now we are 8:50 in the morning, and then together with so many distinguished speakers to discuss a topic of worldwide interest. So I prepare here a text. I would like to share with you some thoughts, and I hope to get your contributions and comments that will significantly help me to have a better view of the current scenario. COVID-19 has been considered by several international authorities and national governments to be one of the most significant challenges for all nations since the end of World War II. This has been the opinion of the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, and President of France, Emmanuel Macron, and so many other heads of state and heads of government, and has considered this epidemic as the most significant and most challenging public health emergency in the country since the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949. This is the reason why the Chinese government considered combating COVID-19 a test for the Chinese system and the governance capacity of a country with almost 1.4 billion people. And perhaps the fight against COVID-19 will be a great test, not only for China, but for all states and its political systems in the world. Since China has been the first country to face the epidemic outbreak, it has become a reference and an ally in the fight against COVID-19. The country has shown the capacity to take quick and effective measures. I group them in three categories. First, measures to contain the spread of the virus, to halt the increase in case of infection by isolating the city of Wuhan with more than 10 million people, and ordering on January 29th that all provincial level regions cancel mass events, suspend long-distance bus travel, and close tourist spots. Second, measures for large-scale medical care by building hospitals in a short time and sending over 42,000 medical teams from various parts of the country to Hubei province. And third, accountability measures, replacing party chiefs in Hubei province and Wuhan city, and firing local officials who have been slow to exercise their duties in identifying and controlling the virus. And China has also acted internationally to prevent the spread of the virus. As a member of the World Health Organization, it opened a channel of dialogue with the Director General of this organization to discuss the actions needed for global management to fight the epidemic, in addition to donating $20 million to WHO. Chinese work also took place in terms of bilateral relations. The country has provided medical supplies and test kits to identify the virus to Italy, the Republic of Korea, and Japan. Also, China has sent experts to Iran, Iraq, and Italy to collaborate in efforts to contain the epidemic, and is perhaps the concrete expression of the concept of community of common destiny for humanity, conceived by Xi Jinping. Some of these lessons learned by China have been transformed into legal measures aimed at preventing the emergence of a new epidemic and, above all, improving the public health system. On February 24th, the 13th National People's Congress, through its standing committee, issued a decision already in force which prohibits and punishes the illegal trade and consumption of wild animals for preventing risks to public health. On March 5th, the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, CPC, and the State Council issued a guideline for further reform of the country's medical insurance system. The reform proposal had already been a decision taken at the 19th National Congress of the CPC and aims to establish basic medical insurance supported by a healthcare system by the year 2030. The coronavirus epidemic may have accelerated the process of creating this basic medical insurance system by enabling medical institutions to offer treatment before fees are charged to the patient. Chinese experience has shown that in fight the epidemic, it's necessary to have three aspects: efficiency in measures to cause, second, transparency in the information and decision-making process of governments, and a third, solidarity among and between the people. These three dimensions are essential to think about the challenges of political systems and governance at national and international levels to deal with emergencies. However, all countries seem to have demonstrated at least one fault in one of these dimensions in dealing with the fight against the virus and whose consequences have been fatal. Regarding the efficiency of the measures to contain the virus, governments are challenged to be able to make difficult decisions as quick as possible without disrespecting the country's political rules and institutions. The country's bureaucracy is also tested at these times. Besides the political system and its governance model, leaders themselves have to prove that they can deal with this war against an invisible enemy. Until recently, and contrary to what has been recommended by health experts, the President of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, encouraged the population to go to the streets. US President Donald Trump has also delayed accepting the gravity of the situation, the complexity of the situation, and start preparations for the battle against the virus. Both leaders are now asking their respective populations to stay in their homes, and they are taking the steps that health experts recommended before. Inefficient leaders are a disaster for any political system, and it gets even worse when they ignore science. Politics will never succeed against scientific truth. To govern without, and even worse, against science is to lead the country to absolute disaster. The act of governing, paying attention to the lessons of experts in the scientific fields, takes me to the second dimension, namely transparency and information and the decision-making process of governments. The population needs to be well informed about the decisions taken of a public health emergency. The society needs to be sure of the credibility of the sources of information. Fake news has played a highly destructive role in fighting coronavirus. Fake news has been a virus for the vitality of political system and domestic governance. Fighting them is a challenge in times of social networks that compete with professional journalism and let the people trust in false experts just because they are celebrities to their audience. Finally, the third response in managing the fight against the epidemic is the promotion of solidarity between the people. Solidarity between states is also an important dimension. Since the beginning of the 21st century, the deficit in the legitimacy and effectiveness of international organizations has been increasingly evident. United Nations, European Union, World Trade Organization, among others, has suffered criticism and the lack of commitment by various governments. Now, amid the COVID-19 pandemic, states are driven to exchange information, cooperate, and be more reliable. World Health Organization, a technical organization, can play an essential political role in the global perception of the importance of multilateralism. I heard that the world would not be the same after this pandemic, and this is true. It's very likely. And perhaps other lessons can be learned from this painful world experience. I'd like to point out some of them very quickly. States will discuss their economic policies because of domestic social pressures. On the one hand, government interference can lose their power of convincing, and on the other, the supporters of socialism and their circumstances can have more voice. Of course, between one and the other, populism is always a threat that must be avoided. Second, science and technology will be of paramount importance for the promotion of social well-being and the guarantee of good governance. Third, the agenda in defense of sustainable development standards and the respect the environment will get new momentum. Fourth, the international order may undergo substantial change because of the need to reform international organizations and strengthen the role of multilateralism urgently. And finally, please, just this paragraph, I'd like to make a final observation about the anti-China campaign that happened in the United States and also Brazil due to some statements made by leading politicians in these countries. Pointing to China as guilty of this pandemic, the government of these countries are covering up their flaws, their failures in crisis management, as well as taking on an obscurantist discourse that is anti-scientific, based on conspiracy theories. We need to be attentive to this type of discourse, as they do not serve to promote international stability and cooperation. Furthermore, looking at this discourse from the internal domestic point of view, there is, as a Brazilian, it seems to me a discourse that attacks not only China, but also Brazilian democracy. I mean, behind this xenophobic discourse, there is a racist discourse that Nazi and fascist regimes gave birth. We cannot forget that democracy and communism defeated these racists in 1945. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Carvalho, for sharing with us your observations on the experiences of China and other countries in fighting this deadly virus. And you just mentioned, actually, that the importance of efficiency in measures to contain the virus, transparency in information sharing and decision making, and also solidarity among the peoples. Thank you. My colleague, Mr. Wang Xiaohui, Editor-in-Chief of China Internet Information Center. Mr. Wang is a veteran media professional. He has been engaged in the research and practice of international communication for many years now. Under his leadership, China.com has done tremendous work in reporting to the world China's fight against the pandemic. He joined us from Beijing. Mr. Wang, please.
Thank you, Mr. Gao, and hello, everyone. It is a tremendous pleasure to join this online seminar, and I would like to take this opportunity to talk about the role of media in public crisis. We have a ready example, that is COVID-19, and it is a typical event of public crisis. In the first stage, China was severely hit, especially Wuhan of Hubei province, the epicenter of the outbreak. Up to now, there are more than 80,000 diagnosed cases in China, and with more than 3,000 people have died. Thanks to the tough and resolute measures taken by the Chinese government and the efforts and cooperation and self-discipline on the part of the Chinese people, people, we have put the spread of the disease under control, of course, at a huge cost. However, the situation in other countries is getting worse. We all know the number is very scary. At this critical moment, what kind of role the media should play? I think the first, we should stand at a higher plane and put the bigger good of mankind first. What we are facing right now is a deadly disease, epidemic disease, not an earthquake, not a flood, not a trade war. No country can be expected to eliminate the virus or stop it from spreading single-handedly. Under such circumstances, media organizations should pay more attention to distributing information, sharing experiences, promoting cooperation, and encouraging governments and people to render help to each other and to other countries. I think media has a key role to play in telling people to avoid social gathering, to wear masks, to wash hands properly and long enough to sing happy birthday to you twice. Media organizations should avoid pointing fingers at each other, which I think is both useless and meaningless. To mankind, the coronavirus is the common enemy. It recognizes no national border. It doesn't carry a passport. In the past few weeks, some American media and the politicians conjured up new names for the virus by calling it Wuhan virus or Chinese virus. And that caused discontent and anger among Chinese people and a new round of quarrel. Let us call it coronavirus and let scientists and medical experts to determine its origin. If some US politicians and media colleagues really want a verbal fight, let's do it after the crisis. Third, it is the responsibility of the media to clarify facts and help get rid of rumors. When disaster fall, rumors run faster than facts and even faster than virus. The media should take the lead to clarify facts, report on experts' advices, effective handling measures, and treatment methods of various countries. Fourth one, I think media should reflect on the lessons we learn in dealing with the disaster, on how to avoid recurrence of the deadly disease, on how to join hands to face hardship yet to know and yet to come. In one word, how to make the world a better tomorrow. China.org.cn is a website under the umbrella of CIPG. It is also the internet arm of the State Council Information Center. Using 10 foreign languages, and through multimedia, we report China to our readers in more than 200 countries and regions. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all for your help and cooperation, and I look forward to your help and advice in the future. Thank you. Mr. Gao, I give you back the microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Wang, for highlighting the role of the media to put the bigger good of mankind first and to avoid pointing fingers at each other and to clarify the facts. Our last speaker is Mr. Hussein Ismail, researcher of Egypt State Information Service. Mr. Ismail is a China expert. He joined us from Cairo. Mr. Ismail, you have the floor, please.
Thank you. Greetings to all of you from Cairo, the capital of Egypt. I convey the wishes of the Egyptians to you and to all the people of the world that the ordeal of COVID-19 will pass quickly. Friends and colleagues, first, let me brief you on the situation in Egypt. Saturday, 28 March, marked the beginning of the 7th week since coronavirus infection cases appeared in Egypt. Up to that date, Egypt had reported 576 COVID-19 cases, 36 passed away, and 121 recovered. The percentage of infected cases that recovered is 28%. Only 10% of infected artificial respiration devices. 70% of infections were contracted by dealing with positive cases who are foreigners and Egyptians who have been abroad. Upper Egyptian patients, people who live in south of Egypt, recover more than the dollar of other provinces of the country. The WHO classifies Egypt as one of the countries with the highest recovery rate. Friends and colleagues, despite the tragic scenes we have seen every day as a result of this epidemic, we also cannot overlook the positive aspect, which had a new evidence that the world is a community of shared destiny, solidarity among people, mutual sympathy and support to find a way out of this disaster as soon as possible, confirming that we live in a world of shared destiny. Here, I will brief you on some features of sympathy, support, and solidarity between Arabs and Chinese in the context of this crisis. From the very beginning of announcing the outbreak in China, the governments and people of our countries have expressed their solidarity and full support to China in its battle against COVID-19 and expressed their confidence in China's ability to combat the virus. This solidarity and support took various shapes and features. On the political level, the leaders of the Arab countries, through their phone calls, messages to Chinese President Xi Jinping, as well as their foreign ministers through their phone contacts with their Chinese counterpart Wang Yi, expressed their country's standing with China and their strong appreciation for the measures China has taken to preventing and controlling the virus. Rather, Egypt sent in early March its Minister of Health to China to express solidarity with the Chinese people. On the humanitarian level, and as the saying goes, a friend in need is a friend indeed, many Arab countries have sent urgent medical assistance to China to help in combating the epidemic. Arab people from all walks of life have also expressed their solidarity and support to China in fighting COVID-19. On the other hand, China has been sharing information in open, transparent, and highly responsible way with relevant authorities in the Arab countries. Friends and colleagues, in many TV interviews, I have expressed my confidence of China's ability to overcome the epidemic. This confidence is not just good feelings and passion for a country I think I know much about it, and not wishes for people close to myself, but rather stemming from hard facts and hard efforts by the government and the Communist Party of China, as well as people who fully trust in the ability of their country to overcome this crisis. The Chinese people established Hoshanshan Hospital in Wuhan in only 10 days. The Chinese government has taken unprecedented measures to contain the spread of the epidemic, mobilized people and national medical supplies for the worst affected areas, and has rehabilitated hospitals in many areas to deal with the epidemic. China has been able to overcome this ordeal because it has a disciplined party working for the people. The grassroots units of the Communist Party of China have been playing a major role in this battle. Their strong organizational and mobilizing capabilities manifested when facing natural disaster or public health crisis. Many in the world may not know enough about the grassroots units of the Communist Party of China. This is an opportunity for the outside world to see closely the Chinese system. The party grassroots units have been mobilized, forming an effective epidemic control network. For example, it has been possible to track and to locate people who left Wuhan after the outbreak of the epidemic. COVID-19 crisis has also reflected China's responsibility and awareness of its duties towards its citizens and towards all the people of the world, based on its vision that the right of health is a basic human right. China is fully aware that its efforts and the sacrifices it makes are not only to protect its people, but also to protect every person on earth. Friends and colleagues, the Chinese nation has managed to emerge from each setback stronger than before. The battle to fight and to prevent the epidemic is difficult, and every effort made by China is not only to protect Chinese people, but also to protect people from to protect the people of the world. We live in a community of shared destiny. Together we will defeat COVID-19. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ismail, for sharing the Egyptian experiences to fight the virus and also the cooperations between China and the Arab world. As Mr. Ismail mentioned, fighting the epidemic takes much effort and requires huge sacrifice. Mutual assistance among countries is of key importance in a time of crisis. Dear friends, our webinar is coming to its close. After listening to so many informative, insightful, and inspiring speeches, I would also like to share with you some observations and what I have learned from these speeches. Major infectious diseases are our common enemy and knows no national borders. No one is an outsider, and no country can stay out of it in a battle against the viral onslaught. Fighting against the virus takes joint efforts of people from across the world, regardless of their nationality, language, the color of skin, and religious belief. I am deeply impressed by the professional thinking and profound insights that you have just shared on topics related to COVID-19. You have shown your readiness and commitment to working with each other to fight the pandemic, as well as your strong confidence that we will prevail in the end. I'm really touched and share your opinions. I think that's why we initiated this webinar in the first place. That is, to pool wisdom, share experiences, and foster greater synergy to overcome the pandemic. Thank you all very much again for joining us. We wish to have your continued support of our work at China International Publishing Group. I look forward to seeing you again in our flagship events such as BRICS Seminar on Governance, China World Dialogue on People-to-People Exchanges, and Global Governance Forum. Thank you all. Take care. See you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.